how video games took over 3 generations. For some people, it started as a sound, a beep, a click, a burst of music from a machine that seemed almost alive. For others, it started with a glowing television in a dark room, a controller in the hand, a small character moving across the screen, a world that obeyed buttons, timing, reflexes, and imagination. At first it looked simple, a game, a toy, a way to pass the time. But video games did something most forms of entertainment had never done before. They did not just ask us to watch. They asked us to enter. They gave us control. They gave us challenge. They gave us worlds we could explore, enemies we could defeat, missions we could finish, points we could earn, and identities we could step into. And slowly, almost quietly, video games began moving through time. From arcades, to living rooms, to bedrooms, to computers, to phones, to every pocket on Earth. One generation discovered them as something new. The next generation grew up with them as something normal. And the newest generation may never know a world where games are not everywhere. So maybe the question is no longer, why do people play video games? Maybe the better question is, how did video games take over 3 generations? And what did they change along the way? For the first generation, video games felt like magic. They arrived in a world that still understood entertainment mostly as something you watched. Television was watched. Movies were watched. Sports were watched. Music was listened to. But games were different. Games answered back. Move left, and the character moved left. Press a button, and something happened. Fail, and the game punished you. Try again, and maybe you got better. That was the hook, not just the screen, the response. For the first time, a machine could challenge you in real time, and the early games did not need to look realistic. They did not need deep stories. They did not need massive worlds. They only needed one thing, a reason to try again. One more level, one more life, one more chance, one more quarter, one more run. That simple loop was powerful, because deep inside the human mind, challenge feels meaningful when improvement is possible. And video games were built around that feeling. You could lose, but you could learn. You could fail, but you could return. You could be bad at first, and better tomorrow. That made games more than entertainment. It made them personal. Then came the second generation, the children who did not just visit video games. They grew up inside them. For them, gaming was not some strange new invention. It was part of childhood. It was there after school, there on weekends, there during sleepovers, there in bedrooms, basements, computer rooms, and living rooms. This generation watched games grow up with them. The little characters became heroes. The simple levels became worlds. The tiny sounds became orchestras. The pixelated adventures became emotional stories. Games became bigger, longer, smarter, more beautiful, more addictive, more social. And something important happened. Gaming stopped being only about the game itself. It became identity. Some people were sports fans. Some people loved cars. Some people played guitar. Some people watched movies. And some people were gamers. They knew the systems. They knew the characters. They knew the secret levels. They knew the cheat codes. They knew the feeling of beating a boss after 20 failed attempts. They formed friendships around games. They built memories around games. They measured parts of childhood by what console was in the house, what game everyone was talking about, and who had the controller next. For this generation, video games were not just something they played. They were part of how they bonded, part of how they competed, part of how they escaped, part of how they became themselves. But then the internet changed everything. Before online gaming, games were mostly limited by the room. You played alone, or you played with the person sitting beside you. Maybe a brother, maybe a cousin, maybe a friend from school. But online gaming broke the walls. Suddenly, the person on the other side of the game did not have to be in the same house. They could be across town, across the country, across the world. A bedroom became a battlefield. A living room became a stadium. A headset became a social life. And the game was no longer just software. It became a place to meet, a place to talk, a place to belong, a place where people knew your username before they knew your real name. This was one of the biggest shifts in gaming history, because once games became social, they became harder to walk away from. You were not just leaving a screen. You were leaving friends, you were leaving a team, a mission, a competition, a conversation, a world that kept going without you, and that changed the emotional weight of gaming. The game was no longer finished when you turned it off, because someone else was still online. Someone else was still leveling up. Someone else was still waiting. Then came the third generation, the generation that did not need a console to enter the game. They had phones, and the phone changed everything again, because a console belongs to a place. A phone belongs to the body. It goes to school, to work, to bed, to the dinner table, to the bathroom, to the car, to every quiet moment where boredom used to live. Once games moved into phones, gaming became almost invisible. No setup, no cartridge, no disc, no television, no special room. Just a tap. A person could be standing in line and playing, sitting in a jeepney and playing, lying in bed and playing, talking to someone and still checking the game. And now the game could follow them all day. This is where gaming became something different. Not just an activity, a background presence. A small digital world always waiting to be reopened. And for young people today, that world is not separate from social life. They can play with classmates, they can play with strangers, they can play with family, they can play with someone they love from hundreds of miles away. A boyfriend and girlfriend can be in different cities, maybe even different countries, and still share the same mission, the same match, the same digital space. That is powerful, because gaming is no longer only about escape. Sometimes it is connection. Sometimes it is how people spend time together when distance separates them. Sometimes it is how friendships survive. Sometimes it is how relationships stay alive. But that power comes with a cost. Because the same thing that makes games meaningful can also make them hard to stop. And that is the complicated truth. Video games are not one simple thing. They are not only good. They are not only bad. They can sharpen reaction time. They can teach strategy. They can build teamwork. They can tell unforgettable stories. They can create friendships that last for years. They can also consume time, break sleep, drain attention, create conflict, reward obsession, and pull people away from the physical world one small session at a time. The danger is not always dramatic. It is not always a person vanishing overnight. Sometimes it is quieter than that. 1 hour becomes 3. A break becomes a habit. A habit becomes a routine. A routine becomes a lifestyle. And then one day, a person looks around and realizes that the game has not simply filled their free time. It has replaced it. Replaced boredom, replaced silence, replaced face-to-face conversation, replaced outdoor play, replaced sleep, replaced goals that take longer, hurt more, and do not reward as quickly. That may be the deeper issue. Games are designed around feedback. Real life is not. In a game, effort is measured. Progress is visible. Rewards are clear. Failure can be restarted. Identity can be upgraded. Enemies can be defeated. The next objective is always waiting. But real life is slower. Real life can be confusing. Real life does not always give points. Real life does not always show progress. Real life does not always reward effort immediately. So for a mind raised on instant feedback, real life can start to feel too slow, too uncertain, too boring, too difficult. And that is where the real question begins. Not whether video games are evil, but whether the human mind was ready for a form of entertainment, this responsive, this rewarding, this social, this portable, and this endless. 3 generations tell the story. The first generation saw the birth of the machine. They were amazed that a screen could respond. The second generation grew up with games as culture. They watched gaming become a language, a hobby, a lifestyle, and for many, a lifelong identity. The third generation inherited gaming as an environment, not something they discovered, something that was already there, built into phones, built into friendships, built into online life, built into childhood itself. And maybe that is why this story matters, Because when something passes through 3 generations, it is no longer just a trend, it becomes part of family history. A father remembers the games of his youth, his son remembers the games that shaped his childhood. His grandson is growing up in games that never truly turn off. And somewhere in that story, the meaning of play has changed. Play used to be mostly physical. A ball, a bicycle, a street, a field, a backyard. A group of kids making up rules as they went along. Now play can happen through glass, through a controller, through a headset, through a phone, through a server connecting millions of people who may never meet in person. That is not a small change. That is a civilizational change. Because how children play shapes how they think. How they think shapes how they learn. How they learn shapes how they live. And how they live shapes the future. So what do we do with this? Maybe the answer is not panic. And maybe the answer is not pretending nothing has changed. Maybe the answer is attention. To notice when gaming is bringing people together, and when it is pulling them apart. To notice when it is creating joy, and when it is becoming escape. To notice when a child is playing, and when a child is disappearing. To notice when a grown man is relaxing after work, and when the game has become the only place life still feels successful. To notice when a phone game connects 2 people across distance, and when it quietly steals the entire day. Because the future of gaming is not going backward. The worlds will become more immersive. The graphics will become more real. The artificial intelligence will become more responsive. The headsets will become lighter. The games will know us better. The digital worlds will become harder to separate from ordinary life. So the question is not whether gaming will remain part of the future. It will. The question is whether we will learn how to live with it wisely. How to enjoy the game without losing the day. How to enter digital worlds without abandoning the real one. How to let games connect us, challenge us, and entertain us, without letting them quietly become the center of everything. Video games took over 3 generations because they understood something ancient about human beings. We love challenge, we love progress, we love stories, we love competition, we love belonging, we love worlds where our actions matter. Games gave us all of that. First in arcades, then in living rooms, then online, then in our pockets. And now, after all these years, the screen is still glowing. The controller is still in the hand. The match is still starting. The mission is still waiting. A father played. A son played. A grandson plays. 3 generations. 3 eras. One question still blinking on the screen. Are we controlling the game? Or has the game learned how to control us?